Well, the outcome didn't happen. Um, what am I talking about? If you listen to the last episode, I was heavily excited about Lander University men's basketball team playing for the Division II National Championship. They played a game in Indianapolis this past Sunday. Unfortunately, we did not walk away victorious by NCAA standards. But for all those who are alum, those who might have played on the basketball team or had any affiliation with Lander University, you all are still winners in our hearts. And so you all did something that no other basketball team has ever done for Lander University. And so we thank you. So right now we are a championship team for the wrestling. So hopefully next year we will, continue that championship pride, that ethos, that mindset that we carry over to the basketball season next year. And so shout out to Coach O and the rest of the fellas for doing something that has never been done before. Hopefully you all slept well this past week and, just know, hey, now you just got to reload. And so, man, it hurts. I was really hoping that we would have came out victorious. I probably would have worn something crazy for this intro. But anywho, always next year, and we will do what we do best, and that's always strive to become champions by NCAA standards. And so speaking of champions, this is a very, this is going to be a good episode. I think you'll enjoy it as we talk about a topic that is often looking at research and looking at the culture when it comes to eating disorders is usually swings one way. But now we actually have good old Danny Boy O'Connor, who's still a champion in our minds for overcoming and working towards his battle with an eating disorder. Danny, as you listen to the introduction, he'll talk about his story and what he had to overcome. But, this is a topic that, for my short time being a sports social worker and just recognizing some of the conversations that, you don't really have a lot of males who really come out and say, hey, I'm suffering from male eating disorder, especially with so many men who are participating in weight-regulated sports. When we talk about boxing, we talk about MMA, you don't talk about eating disorders as much. People cut weight and do all the crazy things. People going out there, sweating, trying to get the pounds off, going to the sauna. But they don't often talk about the other things that happen to make sure they lose weight. Everybody doesn't, do things in a manner where they're dealing with an eating disorder. But however, something that can slowly happen over time. And we've had other guests before talk about their battles with eating disorder, but now we get from a male perspective from sports that are often dominated by men. And so I just want to thank Danny for sharing his voice in this space and creating a culture and community that talks about, you shouldn't have to deal with this alone. And so we will talk about this, as often found as one of the other invisible disorders. And so hopefully we have some conversation that it will share and give to you that will be helpful in your space, whether you're dealing with it or somebody else is dealing with it. And so, as always, when we talk about these mental health topics, we always want you to know that you're not alone and that you actually go about and speak up and get the help that you need and you deserve and you desire, because you belong in this space. And I don't mean that just to say because I'm a social worker, but no, you deserve to have a healthy life. And so that's what we're here to do. And so I'm going to stop talking. So hopefully you enjoy this conversation, and please share this episode, because this is something that I believe that will definitely alter the trajectory for a lot of people that are dealing with eating disorders, or may know somebody that's dealing with an eating disorder. And so, as always, thank you for tuning in, and I hope you enjoy this episode. All right, and welcome to another episode of And Then We Win. I'm Dr. Justice Singleton, the founder of Just Single Vision and host of this show. I'm honored to have Danny O'Connor. I can't give him an introduction like Michael Buffer, but I'm gonna do my best by introducing him. He has 31 professional wins. He is a representative, or was representative, and always will be representative of the USA Olympic team as a boxer. He's had top 5 world ranking in his boxing career, and now he's an author, and he does other great work still in the boxing community. Um, I don't know if he ever will get back out that boxing again, but he really loves the sport itself and the sweet science. And so, thank you, Danny, for joining on this episode today. And it's an honor to have you here.
Oh, well,
Um,
thanks. It's an honor to be here.
yes,
I'm excited anytime I get to talk about stuff I'm passionate about.
yes, and this is a very important topic that we're going to address here today when we talk about eating disorders. And a lot of research and information has been put out, as I've seen as of recent, about how eating disorders impact female athletes. But however, when it comes to men, we don't talk about that a whole much. I don't know if it's the taboo that's out there, but it exists and it's not talked about enough. It's one of the few things we talk about with male athletes that we just don't address enough. And so, fortunately, unfortunately, you have the lived experience. So maybe you could tell us more about your experience dealing with disorder and when you actually realized that it was a disorder that you were dealing with.
Yeah, I mean, it was a serious health risk is what it was. I think people don't really understand eating disorders and the severity of them. It's the second most deadliest mental illness, second to opioid addiction. And there's two parallels here, which I think you really have to understand in my life. Like, number one, I had a weight class which I had to maintain.
Mhm,
I started the first time I got involved in a weight class sport was when I was 14 years old. So through my adolescence, and I just happened to take my dreams high, and I continued for a professional career of boxing, which was 15 years. And so I maintained a weight class throughout that whole time. So you have two parallels. You have the weight class, and then you have, because of the insane weight manipulation tactics I was using to fit myself in that weight class, which were not healthy by any means, then this eating disorder developed, which was another separate issue. I mean, when the weight class was gone, the eating disorder was still here, and I didn't really have any awareness of like what it was, how people are affected, if guys could have them. And
mhm,
so, it was nothing to joke with. I mean, when you mess with systems of your body, with not eating when you should eat, or eating too much when you shouldn't eat, or I induced going to the bathroom a lot through laxatives. So like, when you mess with these systems of the body, like, you can have serious consequences within your health. And so the eating disorder became pretty severe, pretty life threatening. I ended up in the ICU, so it almost took my life multiple different times, and it's affected my health drastically over the years. But again, it's two separate things. I did a lot of things to give myself and develop that eating disorder in a weight class sport that I just didn't know any better. And I kept behind closed doors because I viewed, if I couldn't make weight, it would be a direct liability to my sport and I wouldn't be able to compete. So, um, you know, I developed this thing over years by doing things that I shouldn't have been doing. They were unhealthy to my body, to manipulate it to make a weight class that you shouldn't have done. I mean, combat sports are amazing. It's for all the hardships boxing gave me over the years, I love the sport of boxing. Like, it saved my
mhm,
life in a time when I needed to be saved, and it does that for a lot of other adolescents, and it's not just boxing, it's combat sports in general. So you can absolutely compete in a weight class and be healthy, and be an athlete and go chase your dreams without developing an eating disorder. I just didn't know any better, did a lot of things that were wrong, put my life at risk, not only acutely, but trying to make weight, losing weight,
mhm,
but also then into the development of this eating disorder. Eating disorders are really complex. They affect all aspects of your life, mentally, physically, emotionally. And when it got to a point when I realized, wow, this is a little bit beyond willpower, like, I'm a pro athlete, I have amazing discipline. And when I can't do something that I'm trying to do, I have to like put a hard stop on like what's going on here right now.
mhm.
So it was like a spectrum of things, and it spanned a 20-year span from my adolescence all the way into adulthood. I mean, I'm going to be 41 at the end of this month.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned that because we talk about combat sports and the rise of, like, we always know boxing, you know, people like boxing's been around forever and a day, it seems like. And we've always been a fan of that sport. And then you have wrestlers which are starting to pick up a little bit more, and then the MMA. And so I know that you say that, you can do these things in a healthy way, but I feel like, for long periods of time, and maybe that's why it's so quiet, that it's shocking to me that eating disorders is not a thing that's discussed in these three sports as much. And so I feel like it's one of those quiet things, as you mentioned, like, okay, yeah, we know people may go out there and lose 20 pounds before, they go weigh in and gain 15 more, the next day before they fight. But it's still shocking to me that it's still not as dressed enough when we have these weight class sports.
Yeah, I mean, I think that that is why I felt like I needed to say something, like,
Mm-hmm.
about my story or my life because there wasn't, like, a lot of people talking about it, and when I came into, like, the eating disorder culture, when I realized I had a problem and I had to get it addressed through professionals, there was also not a lot of people talking about it, and definitely not a lot of guys. I mean, in my whole eating disorder journey, I've only spoken to 4 men that, like, openly talked to me about it. One was a child, and so I didn't, like, have that, like, direct line to, like, the guy that I could be like, "Yo, what is going on with me right now?" Because that's how I felt at first. I felt like, "What is" like, it was my job to make my body perform and to train accordingly to do that, and then when my body is not listening to my mind and there's a disconnect and like things seem beyond my control even when I know I should be doing different actions and I'm trying to, like, I
Mm-hmm.
knew, like, man, like, I felt like, what is going on right now? Like, I felt like I'm going crazy. I couldn't really wrap my mind around it, like, and so, I felt like I needed that guy to talk to be like, what really is going on with me, like, for my track record. And that's how I look at everything. If there's something off as an athlete, like, you assess it, if it's an injury, you rehab it, you get back on track,
Mm-hmm.
you stabilize it, you go train, like, that's how I look at everything. So, if there's a hitch in my game, whether it's a mentally, emotionally, physically, it doesn't matter, like, I address it like that, like, "Okay, there's a problem, we gotta address it and then get over it." And so, you know, that was a long road outside of the sport. I think the really important thing that I'm trying to take away is, like, you don't need to cut weight. Like, as an athlete, you should have that lifestyle. As a pro athlete, you're disciplined, you're training, like, that is your lifestyle. And
Mm-hmm.
I normalized putting my life at risk by having these crazy weight fluctuations of really high and then really low. I didn't just maintain a lifestyle as an athlete that was like chasing this dream. And I didn't realize it would affect me in that way. I just thought when I'm done with a weight class and competition in a weight class sport, I'll just go back to what you think would normal would be. And I
Mm-hmm.
never like ask myself like, what are these habits that I'm doing right now with my food, with making weight, when manipulating my body? How could that affect me really later? And
Mm-hmm.
that's the problem. You should definitely be asking yourself that because it can affect your health and also develop this eating disorder, which is completely separate, which now I had to go learn everything that had to do with that because it was drastically affecting my life. So I thought it was important because you're right. There wasn't a ton of information out there. Like, it wasn't books that I could read of like this guy doing this. And so, like,
Mm-hmm.
during this whole path, I definitely felt like I was on an island a lot of the time,
Mm-hmm.
kind of just figuring it out myself, and all these different supports. And obviously, I have a wife of 15 years who was a crucial support. Like, you know, I had already felt so isolated in like the eating disorder, but also I'm not really telling anyone because it's my weight class, it's my life, it's my business, my sport, So, even though my wife doesn't have an eating disorder, she had my back the
Mm-hmm.
whole time, which,
Mm-hmm.
made me feel a bit less alone. But that's why I felt like I had to say something because number one, if you are affected, boy, girl, it doesn't matter who you are or what you
Mm-hmm.
are, if you're affected, then, I thought it would be cool to hear my story, especially if you're a guy where maybe it can be an edge up for you to go get some support or do something. But I've also learned that early intervention is a huge thing when it comes to eating disorders and a lot of mental health in general. And
Mm-hmm.
so there is some kids somewhere in the world right now stepping on a scale. It could be eighth grade into a wrestling team. It doesn't matter, but they're stepping into a scale. And I thought if I just, when I was 14 and I got into that scale, if I just had different awareness and I knew a couple of things and there was more understanding, maybe I could have made a lot of better decisions about not eating and eating too much and, trying to manipulate the fluids in my body to make a weight class. Maybe things should have been a lot different and I wouldn't have had to go down that kind of journey I went down for, 20 years of my life. So I thought it was important that I wrote the book and I told the
Mm-hmm.
message for that kid who doesn't have an eating disorder yet. Don't give yourself one. You don't want to catch one. It was life altering. And so, because there wasn't a ton of information out there, I felt like I had to say something because
Mm-hmm.
who am I? I'm just like a middle class kid from Boston. I just had a dream. I wanted to be a great champion, and one thing led to the next. And I'm not making weight the way that I should have. I'm not treating my body the way it should be because I'm trying to lose weight or not eat. And if I just had a little bit more education about what eating disorder was, what things could have
Mm-hmm.
led to, maybe I could have made a lot of better decisions and still been a champion. That's what I was saying before. I can be a disciplined champion and that's my lifestyle and I'm disciplined and I'm regimented and what you would think a professional athlete would be, right? And then I could fuel myself at 100%, be optimal and go compete with all my skills. I never
Mm-hmm.
once ever in my life stepped inside a boxing ring to box at 100%. You can't do what I was doing to my body and then think you can recover in 24 hours
Yeah.
to get in there. I mean, in 2013, I was going to fight on Showtime Sports. It was my breakout fight. It was the biggest one as a pro to that date. And I was fighting another undefeated prospect from New York. Um, and I basically caused myself to be anemic because of the aggressive starvation to make that weight. I weighed
Mm-hmm.
in about 3 pounds underneath the weight that it should have been. And anemia is basically a iron deficiency, so, like, it manifests in, like, a really lethargic, tired way, and so I got in the ring to fight that night, and I got beat up, I lost. It was
Mm-hmm.
it was my time to perform and show the world who I was, and ultimately, I made myself pretty sick and unable to do that, and so, like, that's just one of a handful of different times I can tell you that I made myself sick to then try to step in the ring to fight 10 rounds, 12 rounds, whatever it may be. Like your body just
Mm-hmm.
can't perform. So as an athlete, you have to fuel it. You have to give yourself, the recovery, the fuel, everything it needs to go perform at its best. And so, that kid that's just new to the weight class sport should really understand that.
Yeah, it's funny. You mentioned that. And I got several follow up questions. You brought up some
Yeah.
good points, but one thing I heard was that fighters rarely go into the ring at 100%. Whether it's they all have some injuries or something else comes to the part where like nobody's really stepping into the ring at 100%. They're usually around like about 80 or 85 or something like that most of the times. And so that could be some pressure along with that. But I was thinking about like that transitional phase because transition is important for a lot of athletes. And so I got a few questions on that. I know where we talked about, and I remember the articles talked about the discipline or the being noticed between discipline turning into destruction. And there was a piece about that. And now that you look back at your life and thinking about your career, when we talk about that being disciplined and actually being to a point where it can be destructive. If you could go back, like what point would you notice that transition from going like, oh, being a very disciplined boxer into like adopting destructive attitudes or behaviors? When should like somebody do some type of self reflection to make sure that that space doesn't happen or that transition doesn't happen?
Uh, for me, it was, for me, it was very clear because I've had a level of discipline that has been super high since forever, and so
Mm-hmm.
I use that in wrestling, and that's how I became a champion, and I've used that in boxing, it's how I've become a champion, and so I had the ability to have this discipline at a very high level, like, if I needed to train today at this time. This is what I was doing. It was all day, every day. And
Mm-hmm.
it was consistent too. The issue was I was using that discipline in the wrong areas, right? Like to starve yourself for months, like it's not easy to do. You need a form of discipline to do that. And so I thought that these actions I was taking were not that bad. In reality, they were really bad. They were developing other habits. They were developing the eating disorder. And so my discipline was so rigid with them that it was so strict and so consistent that then all of a sudden one day it wasn't, it was gone. And so that's like very clear to me when I'm trying to do something and my body's not doing it. I knew like, okay, here's a problem right away, because all I do as an athlete is tell my body to do stuff all day long and train it to do it at a higher intensity, right? And so when all of a sudden I couldn't do that, like I knew that there was a really big problem. The issue was I didn't know
Hmm.
what type of problem, because I didn't know what an eating disorder was. So I thought it was a mental issue. Like 2013, when I realized, okay, and I'll give you an example. Like I could literally starve myself on the drop of a hat. Like I'd go into training camp, I'd flip a switch, and that was it. And then when training camp's over, I would go the other way. Like I told you, up and down, that's no good.
Hmm.
It's got to be right. But I could always come back and flip the switch and then starve myself. Then all of a sudden I couldn't. No matter how hard I tried, I couldn't stop. And so it didn't matter what was on the line. Like the Boston Garden main event was on the line, a BBC World Championship fight that I had been looking for and campaigning for 10 years. Like that was the goal, 10 years of being focused on the same thing. None of those things equated to being able to control things. And so that's why I knew like this is a big issue. So in 2013, I stepped away from the sport because I thought I had to come out of the weight class to figure this out. I couldn't have all the pressures all at once. And I thought it was like a mental thing. I thought like, no problem. I'm going to get over this thing in one night. Like I'll be back in action, just like an injury. I'm going to rehab it and boom, this thing is done. And man, was I wrong. I was super wrong. Like years with an S, years later, still
Hmm.
going down the path of trying to figure it out. I realized really how much depth there is to an eating disorder, how complex they are, how you're affected. And it was really just hiding right in plain sight. And so it still baffles my mind, like how crazy these
Yeah.
things are. And it's just like, man, but that was like the clear, like when like the loss of control came, that's what
Hmm.
cause I know you don't have a control of a lot of things in life, but if my mind tells my body to stand up and walk across the room as an able
Yeah.
person, an athlete, I get up and walk across the room. So if I'm telling myself, you can't eat this right now, but yet I'm not controlling that no matter what. And, you're talking about a binge eating episode of 60,000 calories. It's not like you just have one snack and I'm giving into one
Hmm.
snack. I'm going back from eating, vomiting, and not induced. And that's what my body is happening because there's so much food being consumed that even when I'm trying to stop, I can't. There was a huge problem.
Yeah. And you already brought up a good point because I was going to ask about, most times, athletes have difficulty to transition just from like going from an athlete just to going adopt to a regular lifestyle. And so even when it
Yeah, it
comes
was
to, and even
crazy.
sometimes
That
with
was hard too.
injuries, yeah, even with injuries, it's like a transition from injury to being like, healthy again, but still balancing that. But when we talk about eating disorders, and you mentioned that there was challenges with that. So I think you brought up a very good valid point for the listener and hopefully future reader about like, okay, it's not going to cut off like a light switch once you finish doing the sport. And a lot of people don't realize that, and they may not get the necessary support for that. So thank you for bringing that up because it's not like, hey, all right, now that I'm done with the sport and would not have to worry about weight class, then I don't have to worry about the disorder anymore. And it sounds like you still had to deal with those challenges even after you got out the ring for a while. Um,
Yeah, can you say the question one more time though? Your thing
well,
froze.
I'm just
Yeah.
no, I'm just reiterating what you were saying, and so how important that is that you shared that. And so, your support system, what was your support like? Or what type of support did you need? Because to me, it feels like a lot of times when it comes to any type of disorder, people feel like they don't have the necessary support for it. They don't have friends, they don't have colleagues, or they don't have parents to help them out, whatever the case may be. So, what is that support system like? What is needed for you feel like for anybody dealing with an eating disorder? What should they look for and what should they have to help support them?
You got to go find those. I mean, and that's how I felt like when I first came out. It was like, all right, well, I got an eating disorder. Obviously, men can be affected now. Like, what is this? How am I affected? Like, like, how can I get over this thing? And you know, an eating disorder is really complex because think about like addiction or like alcohol or drugs. Like you can just have complete abstinence. Like you're working on not doing it anymore. Well, that's not the same with food. You can't quit food. You have to eat for
Mhm.
survival. So it's almost like putting the out of control back in control, but while you're out of control at the same time because you have to eat. So it was really tricky, and it was like 4 steps forward, 10 backwards, 2 forwards, because you have to learn what this new relationship with food is when you already have one that's so messed up in the first place. And so the recovery was messy and all over the place. I didn't feel like at first I had a ton of supports because
Mhm.
I didn't feel like people could understand me. I didn't really understand myself yet. I didn't understand what was going on. I just knew that I couldn't stop doing something that all of my might was trying to stop, and literally my life was on the line, and it still didn't equate to that. So those are the only things I really knew. And when I went to find guys, I couldn't find a ton of them. So that made me feel more isolated. Uh, Obviously, I'm keeping everything from the professional world because I don't want to ruin my career. So
Mhm.
I'm even more isolated. So when I found supports, I had to mold into like what everything out there. What is everything? I don't care. I have no biases. This person believes this. This person believes this. I want to see everything. And then I'm
Mhm.
going to like kind of do a couple things and see if I like it and see if I don't like it, see what it likes for me. And when I look at like professional supports, I've had contact with every type you can think of, from psychiatrists to doctors of psychology to sports psychologists to like the mindfulness school at the UMass Medical School I went to for a while, and
Mhm.
mindful self compassion, like all these different like types of supports that I thought might either help me or not help me. Sometimes I was doing two or three things at one time. I went to like your traditional intensive outpatient. I was the only man out of the patients and the practitioners. Everyone was female. And so
Mhm.
Overeaters Anonymous, like I literally just was like, all right, if this is some type of mental, emotional growth, whether it's for eating disorders or not, I'm going to just check it out and then see if I like it, see if it's a good fit for me. If not, I'm going to keep it moving. If it is, I'm going to try to like really buckle down and see if it works. And so it was years with an S, years of that. And I honestly don't think it was like one thing. I think it was like a whole bunch of different things. Like development's kind of like an onion, there's layers. So, I
Mhm.
kept doing different things that gave me more information, gave me more understanding. And ultimately, I got to a place where I feel like, I beat the eating disorder. So,
That's great. And so I'm assuming this is what led to your life of, developing Bite Like a Man and also writing your book that you just recently released not too long ago with Weight. And so can you tell us more about like Bite Like a Man and which one came first, the book or the organization? So I'd love to hear the story behind that.
they came like at the same time. I mean, I knew like, and that's the thing, like you through the adversity, I always found like footholds. One time I read a book by Josh Hamilton, and he doesn't have an eating disorder, but his book, I could try to connect to it as much as I could for the general message of if you have some mental health, get
Mhm.
better. And so I've done a million things like that over the time where I've like taken some sort of motivation from somebody or something and used it on myself. And when I went through everything and no one was really talking about it and I couldn't find any information, I was like, I have to write a book. I have to tell my story. I felt responsible. I mean, the weight class itself, we already talked about, like, there has to be more awareness so people can make better decisions. Don't do what I did to make weight. Don't give yourself an eating
Mhm.
disorder. But then in the eating disorder realm, you have an estimated 10 million men, which is coming from, national statistics that are verified. So if you have 10 million men in a community that doesn't really have a voice right now, and I can tell you a story that might help all them or, shed a light on a whole demographic of people that might need some extra support, I was going to try to do that. So I knew that I wanted to write the book, and it was a super hard process because I had to learn the book business and everything that went into it. And there's a lot of different ways to write a book, right? Like myself, co-author, co-writer, writer for hire. Like there's a million different ways to do it. So
Mhm.
I think that writing the book was like one of my most my most purposeful things because it allowed me to give me a message to my children, give a message to all the people suffering, all the people in a weight class. And so I really tried to make it as perfect as I could. And with that came the platform of Bite Like a Man. Like I just wanted a community where if you're a guy and you need anything like information, answers, resources, some sort of community that you could come and be a part of that community because that's what I was lacking. I didn't have any
Mm-hmm.
community. Like I just felt like I was kind of figuring this thing out on my own for a long time. And it was, I call it like a disorder of loneliness. Like it was super lonely because
Mm-hmm.
I was like, I went to AA and went through a 12-step program and I just didn't tell anyone that my issue was food instead of alcohol because I felt more connected to the guy that I could talk to. And, I did have crazy drinking stories. So like I could fit a little bit better there. And so I
Mm-hmm.
just thought like, I wanted to create a community where people could come if they needed that connection. Men especially.
Yeah, for sure. And like you said, one thing most people want to have when they're going through something is somebody that they can relate to. And when
Hell
you have
yeah.
that, like, I don't care what it is, like, you want to
I
not feel like you're the
know.
lone person in the room.
Yeah.
And so, I'm glad you found a community and created a community because I guarantee you, like, there'll probably be more and more people who are willing to, like, okay, now somebody's out there for me, or like, feel like they've been through what I went through. I thought about this earlier because I know about you. You put down the gloves for a little while, and you did your own little thing, did a little dabbling in your professional lifestyle, but then you had kind of so you talked to your family about getting back into boxing again. At that point in time, were you afraid that I don't know if you were like had overcome your disorder at that time frame when you went back into the ring, but was that a thing that you were afraid of as well? It's like, okay, now I'm gonna get back in the ring, but also will that eating disorder still follow me back into the ring?
Oh, I was petrified. Yeah, like that's why I had to do it. I had to see like if I 'cause that was like a personal goal to me. So 2013 is when I separated. Okay, now I have an eating disorder and I'm in a weight class sport. That's when I realized, like, damn, I got a problem that I got to overcome. So I stepped away from the sport, and I was only out for like a year at that time. I saw like a sports psychologist, and we worked on a lot of stuff. And then I went back to the sport to try to, continue my career. Like it's a young man's sport. Like I'm not trying to stay out for a long time. I wanted to continue my career. I wanted that world championship belt,
Mm-hmm.
which that came in 2018. So when I went back to the sport after a year, I still had shreds of this eating disorder. I still didn't understand it totally, and it was still the recovery process was still ongoing. Ultimately, 2018, I ended up in the ICU, and that's when I decided, like, the sport, the weight class, like, my health is really at risk right now. I got to give one up. And so at that time, and it was a hard decision. I mean, I had just I spent 10 years trying to fight for that WBC World Championship belt. And
Mm-hmm.
2 hours before weigh in, when I should have been weighing in to accomplish that dream, the paramedics were taking me to the ICU. So I never got the chance to fight for that belt. I never, like, the fight was over. I never got another chance. So that dream was kind of acutely, abruptly just gone. And so I was also younger. I was still in my prime, like, 2018, what was I, 32 or 33? But at
Mm-hmm.
that time, I realized, like, my health was in such jeopardy, like, I had to step away from the sport. Like, it was one or the other at this time. I couldn't just do both at the same time, and so in 2018, I stepped away, and I stepped away for good. And so I stepped away, I worked on the eating disorder, no weight class, no anything, and after years, I got to a good point, and then 5 years after that, I decided, like, I'm gonna go back to the sport, and I still felt great, like, I was 38 at that time, and it was a little
Mm-hmm.
bit older, but I felt great, and I was taking care of myself, and, because of the eating disorder, I did have a lot of inconsistency in my career, so I didn't
Mm-hmm.
always take as much punishment, right? Like, that's kinda like combat sports, like, how much punishment have you taken over an extended amount of time? I still felt really good, but the biggest fear was that weight class, the eating disorder coming back, like, some sort of pitfall, then and I knew it, and that's why I wanted to do it. That was like my personal like vendetta. Like I wanted to do weight the right way, eat in a healthy way, have it be a lifestyle,
Mhm.
not cut any weight, get on the scale, weigh in, and then compete and see where it would kind of go. You know what I mean? And um, I don't want to ruin the end of my book. I thought I wrote a pretty
Yeah.
good book, but
Yeah.
I will tell you that it was probably the most special time I've ever stepped back in the ring was in 2000 and I think it was 2023 after not
Mhm.
being out of the ring for 5 years and that eating disorder, stepping back in the ring, being able to compete. That was a special night, more meaningful than any belt or any Boston Garden venue or anything like
Mhm.
that. That night was special for me.
'Cause you overcame, and that's had to be a beautiful
Yeah,
moment.
yeah.
So I know I don't wanna tell you don't tell everything about your book, but if you could, like, what will the reader take away from reading the book Weight Class? Like, what are some things that they'll take away from that book?
How not to give yourself an eating disorder. I think that's the biggest one, and
Mhm.
you know, it's gonna be more. Everything that I did was extreme, from the cutting weight to the gaining weight to the boxing to the eating disorder. Like everything was extreme, and so I think parents or anybody attached to a weight class sport, like it should be a dire warning, like a blue book of what not to do in a
Mhm.
weight class sport, like um because the tactics I was using to starve myself, deplete myself, I had no idea that they could have lasting effects for the rest of my life. And so, anyone attached to a weight class sport, athlete or parent or anybody, I think it should be a definitely like a warning of what it can be, because that's the thing. Nobody knows really what it could be because there's nobody talking about it. There's no stories told about it. And so, there's kind of like that hint of unknowing. And so like, that eighth grader stepping into the weight class, like his life's kind of at risk and he doesn't even know it if he happens to make a couple of decisions like when it comes to how he's making weight and how he's treating his body.
Mhm.
And then on the other realm for the eating disorder, I mean, it was a chaotic, crazy 20 years of my life, and it was I had no idea anything in this world could have power like that, especially over me and over my mind. And so I think it's just a really good story with a lot of takeaways from different markets and different cultures. And at the end of the day, I was just trying to raise awareness about the weight class for that athlete and to
Mhm.
raise awareness about eating disorders because it really is a life-threatening disease that, you know, the severity of it should be really understood more. So, I thought, and you know what the crazy thing is? In 2007, there was a guy named McDonald from Canada, and he wrote a book about combat sports and about his eating disorder, which was anorexia.
Mhm.
I got diagnosed with binge eating, so that means I can't stop too much.
Mhm.
Anorexia was his, and it never went mainstream. It never,
Mm.
2008 is when I went to the Olympics, so I was still new. I made the Olympic team only after boxing for 3 years. Like 2004 was the Olympic year in Athens. I started boxing in 2005 and I made the Olympic team in 2008. So it happened really fast, but that book was never mainstream. You can't even buy it now, and I didn't
Wow.
find out about it until like a month ago. So I just always think back, like if that book was being shouted the message of it a little bit louder, maybe it could have reached me. And so I wanted to shout my message from the highest platform I possibly could, which is, basically what I'm doing now. And hopefully it can help somebody.
Yeah, it definitely will, and I don't know, I like the fact that you're creating some awareness around it because most people don't know what it is until they're like sorry, I won't say it's too late, but they're, like, really
Too late.
invested or they really, are going through the disorder that they're dealing with, and it could be like, "Man, I've been doing this 5, 6 years. I had no idea that I was dealing with, either anorexia nervosa or, or bulimia or anything like that," and so you're just like, "Wow, okay." Now somebody's out there as a voice for us, and hopefully you continue to champion and be that voice. I will say that your wife definitely loves you because I've talked to some people before who did like lifting and whatnot, and they were just like, whenever their person like goes on their thing where they on a very strict diet and eating or not eating a whole lot, they just turn into a totally different person. And so I can imagine that, you know, your wife really loves you because there's a lot to deal with, a lot of challenges to go through. And maybe like there may be some opportunity for spousal support or like people in the community or your ecosystem, how to definitely help them, cope with this because I can imagine they deal with a lot too. They take on a lot when somebody's dealing
Yeah,
with one of these disorders.
yeah. I mean, my wife is my best friend, and I don't know that I could have done a lot. I mean, I don't like to say I couldn't have done it without her because I like to think that I could do anything. But
Hmm.
she was absolutely a crucial role in it, and so like in both of it, like she saw all the ways that I cut weight. Like there was no hiding that. Like some nights I'd come home and I'd be shedding 10 to 15 pounds in that one day in the sauna. I'd be half dead and I can't move in bed until it's so she had to deal with that. But then when the eating disorder took over and I'm in treatment and I'm in doing this and I can't control it and now I'm out of commission, like she has to pick up the back end on all that. And so I mean that support was crucial because it allowed me to focus on getting better and saving my life.
Mm.
And so, yeah, I think that, I don't know, like either I'm the only one and I just had the craziest story in the history of making weight and what developed, or there's a lot more people like me that might need to hear it. So that was like, you know, time will tell, right? A lot of people have reached out and said how much it helped them. And so I don't know.
That's great. And you mentioned one thing you mentioned earlier is that you want, parents to understand and, so therefore maybe their kids don't go through at the earlier age. And so, what are some things that you're doing, or are you doing anything to help support, youth from going down this path of, or having more knowledge about and healthier ways to cut weight, or make sure they are doing the things necessary in a healthier way and not so much of a destructive manner.
Yeah, I mean, I like being a keynote speaker. I mean, I love speaking to the internet. It's whatever, but I would rather like speak to your face. So, as a
Hmm.
keynote speaker, I've had a couple opportunities to go to different communities, talk to professionals. Like I'm going to Orlando in May for the Ringside Physicians Association, and
Okay.
so I like being able to talk to parents and professionals and give them my experience and what I went through so it better helps them understand how to help their kids because like a lot of people try to fixate on adults, especially when I was a younger kid, but
Hmm.
the reality was like I mostly suffered with this besides my professional team keeping me alive and my wife. Nobody knew the depth of this disorder for any amount of my life. And so when you look back at different areas, like there's no way that anyone could have known how deep I was doing it because I was doing a lot of it behind closed doors. Like, when I
Hmm.
would buy laxative, where I wouldn't even buy them, I thought that this is how crazy the young mind is. Okay. 15 years old, I'm walking into Walgreens by myself, cutting weight. And I'm scared that the guy at the cashier ringing out that works at Walgreens will tell someone that I'm buying laxatives so that I won't be able to wrestle and fulfill my dreams. So I steal those laxatives, and now on a nightly basis, I'm eating 3 times the recommended dose, and I'm also using that bathroom at Walgreens at times it's open so that nobody at the school or at home can see me. And so no one could have really known how crazy the weight was over the time because I was doing that, but I have a lot of people look at me now and they say, "Oh, well, I noticed you were eating like this at this time, and I thought that that was weird." And like when you look back, there were a lot of weird things that I was doing around food, nutrition,
Hmm.
training, but nobody ever knew the depth of it, and I wasn't
Yeah.
ready to tell you until now. So I think being a keynote speaker is cool because I can educate people and I can talk to people and I can talk to active people that are competing, not only the people helping the kids, but also the kids themselves. And that's what I think the biggest thing right here is awareness. Like you got to know like what I was doing so you can know how not to do that stuff. That's the reality.
Yeah.
And there's not a ton of people talking about it and there's not a ton of stuff out there. So, I just think the more I can talk and spread the message and because the reality is like death should never be the result of making weight. Never.
Hmm.
Death should just never ever be the result of making weight. You should be an athlete, fueling yourself and going in and competing and chasing all your dreams. And so the more I can like tell like, hey, this is the stuff I did and you shouldn't do it to your body, not only because you're putting your life at risk in the sport, but because you're putting your life at risk outside of the sport when the sport is gone. I mean, I I turned myself completely orange one time, all my hands, my elbows, my skin, so visible that when I went out, people would see me. And so like when you mess with electrolytes and like the minerals and the stuff in your body, you put yourself at serious, serious jeopardy. You know what I mean? And so I think just awareness and speaking about it the most that I can to try to uh change culture, raise awareness, make better decisions, more healthy decisions for your own body. It's the best I can do. I mean, what else can I do?
I don't know, write another book maybe? Who knows?
Listen, listen. So I thoroughly enjoyed the book. Like
Mm,
it was so purposeful and it was like a growing experience. Like I got to look at my life in reverse and like I talked to my first wrestling coach ever, who had no idea, right? Because I'm
mhm,
being so secretive. So like it was a great experience, but it wasn't like I was writing about the weather. Like it was my life and it was extremely hard to write about it, dissect it, and
mhm.
continue to do it and then put it together in a way that it would be entertaining for the world to listen. And so that was definitely like one of the most purposeful things that I've ever done. And I've done a lot of cool things. Like I went to school and became a paramedic. So, that was a cool experience saving people's lives. And I've just had a lot of different experiences with boxing, outside of boxing, where, and the book was like high up on the purpose.
Oh, for sure. Gosh, I had one more question, and you reminded me when you're thinking about, your coaches, like he didn't know, and then also like being involved in this sport. I probably should ask this one earlier, but we got Nicole and talking, and I was just like, oh my gosh. But just thinking about, you know, is it did you feel like it was more pressure on yourself that was being induced to like, I have to do these things to make this certain way? Or did you feel like it was the coaches or is it often coaches that create a lot of this stress to make sure that you are making this weight? And because we know the weight class there it exists, like 147 will be 147 regardless, no matter what. Um, and so just thinking about did you feel like you put was the pressure put on yourself, or did you feel like outside sources put a lot of pressure on athletes or yourself that might have led to you adopting some of those behaviors?
No, I didn't feel outside pressure. Well, first of all, I picked a, I might have I created the pressure, right? Because I picked that
Mm-hmm.
weight class. And the more the eating disorder got out of control and I couldn't maintain the weight class, the higher the pressure got because it was like a boiler cooker. The two, the eating disorder and the weight class, directly conflicted with each other. And so when one was out of control, the other one was, the tactics became more crazy. And
Mm-hmm.
so that created its pressure. And I created that. I chose that weight class. And that's why eating disorders are hard. Like no one's forcing me to eat. I'm the one that's doing it. Like whatever you want to decide about the psychological, where I say it's out of my control, it's out of my
Mm-hmm.
willpower. That's a whole different thing. But at the end of the day, like I can't blame this person for doing anything. It's only me. So I'm chasing that dream, but at the same time, I'm sabotaging it. And so it's like this very, very negative emotional cycle that is a pressure cooker, but it's not from outside. It's from me. Like I kind of created that chaos
Mm-hmm.
from the beginning. My foundation of getting into a weight class sport from the beginning was created with those bad habits. It wasn't created on a strong foundation of being the best athlete I could be. It was created on a foundation of trying to artificially fit myself into this weight class that I don't know, maybe I shouldn't have been in the first place. And
Mm-hmm.
if I had done it the right way and just lived a healthy lifestyle, maybe I could have avoided a lot of the future torment of an eating disorder, but I didn't. I
Mm-hmm.
was really disciplined and focused when I had to be. And then when I wasn't, I went the opposite way and went crazy and skyrocketed my weight and did all these things to gain weight. And then I'd have to take it off again. And it was that yo-yo, up, down, up, down.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So two more things before we leave here. One thing I know you said you'd like to do um, keynote speeches and things of that nature. You like to get out in front of people to do the work. How can people contact you to make sure that Danny O'Connor is the face of their program or their organization whenever they have an event? How can they get you out there?
Yeah, bitelikeaman.com is the website. It has all the links to the book for Amazon and for all the different platforms to buy the book. And it has a whole page for my speaking, which I mean, it is pretty good. I've already been asked to do a couple of keynotes, and it's cool. It's like boxing, but you don't really get punched in your face. You're not worried about getting hurt.
Yeah.
Like it's still, and that's how I view entertainment, like comedy and boxing, and like it's like that arts type of thing. So I do enjoy speaking, and you can book me right there on the page, and it's bitelikeaman.com.
Okay, awesome. And the last thing, I ask all my guests this, and so because we talk about, winning is the ultimate goal. Like everybody wants to win when they get involved in a sport, but there's so many things that takes to get to winning. Like whether it's in training or taking care of yourself, there's so many things that we focus on, and so I would like to ask you, what do you feel like, throughout your boxing career, or all the things you experience, whether it be writing a book or whatnot, what do you think are critical components to address before we even think about winning?
Wow, that's a pretty good question. That's a harder one. I hate losing. I'll tell you that right now. Like I lost in my boxing career. I have 3 losses. One I felt like it was a bad decision, so I always
Hmm.
say like I got 2, and those 2 losses came to the same kid, same individual. So I lost to the same kid twice, and both times he got me square out. Second time
Hmm.
even worse than the first time, and I absolutely hate it. I hate losing in any form. But what I will say, like winning winning's like a byproduct of all the effort you put in, all the work, all the hard work you've done to prepare. And so I try to like make that real known that like that's just a byproduct of like how you're working on a daily basis. And so I've always had a hard work ethic. I've always took it the extra mile. Obviously, you can see by the extremes in my life. Well, the same extremes were in my athletic career. Like I was trying to do the best things that I possibly could do at all times to be the best and most prepared and most trained competitors. So winning was a byproduct of how much work I put in, and sometimes it's one of those things. It's not like that second loss to that kid that I lost to twice. I trained unbelievably hard for that fight, and I just lost. Like
Hmm.
that's the way it was that night. Like it just wasn't my night. And so, focusing on the journey a little bit more than the outcome, I think helped me a lot in my later days. I learned that from the sports psychologist. Like the more I worried about the now, focusing on my training, the more that outcome was like a little bit out of my control, but the more it leaned towards the win, right? Because I put in the extra work. And then as a professional athlete, you also have to outweigh risk and reward. Like, is winning worth my life? Is winning worth all this money? But then my life, like you have to put all those things into account and weigh the risk versus reward. In 2018, when I went to the ICU, um, a sport's not worth my life, no matter how much money. And so at that time, I had to make a different decision than in 2013 when I decided, like, what's at stake right now, And so
Hmm.
I think just the training preparation and then understanding the cost of winning too.
Thank you, Danny, for sharing your time today and giving some powerful words today. And so I'm definitely gonna purchase me a book really, really soon. I'm looking forward to learn more about you, and also, the things that are, I would say, kind of silently plaguing these sports that deal around with weight class. So, thank you so much for sharing your time and opportunity. Your only fault is that you're a Boston fan, but it's okay. Other than that, you're 99.9%
uh,
fine with me.
Listen,
Thank you,
spoken like
Dan.
a true Yankees fan. You all right? I was spoken like a true Yankees fan. No, I listen. I appreciate it. I think for this, first of all, I appreciate you buying the book. That's like the hardest thing.
Yeah,
Once you write a book, you gotta. You know what? I wanted to write a book so I didn't have to talk about it because I don't love talking about the stuff too much. But then I realized when you write a book, you have to talk about it more. So now you're on the hook to talk about it even more,
yeah.
and then after you write it, you got to learn how to sell it. So that's like the path that I'm going down now. So I appreciate that. And I do think like this whole thing is like the more you know what I mean? I didn't know anything. And I
Yeah.
went down a path that drastically altered my whole life and my career. And so this is like one of those things, the more if if it helps you pass it along.
I'm pretty sure it will, and I will definitely highlight on our socials and make sure people know about what's available for them. And there's a community out there that exists for them, and so we'll definitely do that. And so thank you so much, Danny, and I hope you have a good day.
Yeah, you too, man. I appreciate it.
And thank you for tuning in to And Then We Win. My name is Dr. Justin Singleton, and I'm a sports social worker. I love what I do. And if you're interested in learning how I can best support your athlete, your parent group, or even the team, please feel free to reach out to me at info@justsinglevision.com. That is info@justsinglevision. Feel free to contact me for a free 30-minute consultation so we can figure out how we can best support the mind, vision, and action of your athletes. Thank you and take care.